Welcome to Fade the Public. This is your host, Leo Herrera, on a mission to spread the truth.
Let's work. Yo, it's go time, showtime, never backing down time. One shot, yo, make it count, yo.
What's up, everybody? It's Leo Herrera. I'm here with Nick Caputo. This guy's on a mission to revolutionize how people perceive their overall well-being. He puts out information basically every single day for his followers to get a taste of his method of holistic ease to optimize your health. If you haven't done so already, go follow him on Instagram at Grub from the Garden, where you'll find so much information about everything that has to do with your health. And it's actually pretty funny with your memes. So he just released 2 courses on how to fast and some breathwork basics. And he's also got a week-long retreat event going on at Willows Creek in California in mid-September. So go check that out on his page. And truly doing some wonderful stuff, bro. It's so great to have you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me on here, bro. It's good to be here. Much love.
Absolutely. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about our limiting beliefs around food and fasting that, humanity has in general, and some breathwork basics, and wrap it up with some urine therapy. So let's get started, bro. So how long have you been on this journey, and what inspired you to get started?
So I've been on this journey for 5 years. It's been 5 years of actually embodying it, and 7 years since I really started doing research, somewhere around 7 years. There was probably a good 2-year period where I was doing some research and learning some new things and becoming interested before I actually really dove in full on. So I would say, I usually say like 5 years at this point.
Damn,
And
nice.
I guess I got inspired from, things that happened for myself. I got in a snowboarding accident, broke my neck, and I was dealing with my own like gastrointestinal issues and just wanted to get to the bottom of things, and didn't see the doctor out really do favors, and didn't feel like I was cared for in the way I needed to, and decided that I needed to figure shit out for myself. So I've been on the path to doing just that.
That's awesome, bro. That's pretty inspiring, because I've been kind of doing the same thing on my journey. Like when I went to school, I just felt like I was there and was kind of wasting my time. I was like, it's time for me to do my own thing and figure it out myself. So I kind of wanted to start with some limiting beliefs most people have that we've been taught, in society about food in general, like the amount of food that we consume. I want to learn a little bit more about protein and like the truth about that. So what do you got to say about that? What would you say are the beginning things that we could start off with?
For sure. So, I mean, as far as like limiting beliefs go, I think there's a lot of misconception as it pertains to what we need for survival, and which differs from what we need to thrive as like athletes, etc. And then I also think that there is some misconceptions on what's good for us, things that people think are not good for us that actually are, and things that people think are good for us that actually aren't. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there on both sides of pretty much everything pertaining to food, and there's a lot we can discuss here.
Yeah. So with I guess we all really know that processed food isn't good for you. So that's kind of like an obvious one. But what would you say are some of like the ones that are like kind of behind the scenes out there that, like most people think are pretty much good for you, but it's like not true?
I mean, a lot of like vegan foods, like I wouldn't eat like kale, like raw kale. A lot of like raw leafy greens, I would say, like if you're going to eat vegetables, boiling or cooking is even better because the oxalates. So certain things that like, like the raw vegan lifestyle, like I wouldn't say that veganism is ideal. I wouldn't say that everyone who doesn't eat animal foods is unhealthy, but I would say as far as like the entire like idea of veganism in general, there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to the way that people who want to go vegan are educated to do so.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably the main one for people to understand or understand.
Yeah. And from my understanding, it looks like you're trying to create like a holistic approach with food. So like what are like the top 3 or to 5 foods that, are like really important for, optimizing your performance, either as an athlete or just a regular human being trying to get more energy? Because I know
So
I started off with just mainly fruit and raw eggs. I've been kind of on that vibe, but then I feel like I'm low key like lacking a few things that I should be eating. So I'm kind of curious what you would say about that. I mean, kind of don't, I mean, from what I'm hearing, most people think, like being healthy is basically like being vegan, eating like all green and all that, but it's kind of like you want to include all these types of things, even like raw meat and all that stuff. So what would you have to say?
yeah, I mean that's a very loaded question, but I can speak on it for a couple minutes. So really what I think is, I mean, to narrow it down to 5 foods would be tough, but I can do it. What I would say in general is that we want to stick to foods that come from nature and foods that are, I guess, I mean, not to sound like Paul Saladino, but like not chemically protected foods.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and also not like denatured foods. So basically there are ways to get around a lot of the chemical protection of foods, which I feel like some people like in the carnivore world don't always like mention, like sprouting nuts and seeds and things of that nature. But I would say if I had to say top 5 foods, I would say milk is number one. Raw milk is probably the number one food on earth, in my opinion, in my experience.
And
And then
why
I
is
would,
that? Can we get a little deeper into that? Like, what does milk have that, like, is so good for you?
I
Or
think a
raw
better
milk?
question would be, what doesn't raw milk
Yeah.
have? So I mean, it's complete like macronutrient profile. So there's proteins, fats, and carbs in pretty adequate amounts. There is, different like immunoglobulins and different things like for your immune system. There's lots of bacteria for your gut. There's, obviously the sugars like the lactose, but in raw milk, there's also lactase. So that's the enzyme that helps you break down lactose. So lactose intolerance is usually a thing that's a product of pasteurized milk and pasteurized dairy because there is no enzyme in the milk to break down the sugars in the milk, which is why sometimes people react to lactose because they're not getting the enzyme to break it down in the milk. Now we also can create it, but those who are at, like a lower tendency to create it, those who haven't consumed a lot of dairy, maybe it's genetic, I don't know, tends to be a thing where some people are more adequately producing lactase than others. And if you're not getting it in the milk, then for those who are having more difficulties creating it, whether that, I think that's gut bacteria related, honestly, but people have their different opinions on it. But I mean, so there's lactase in raw milk. There is different things like epidermal growth factor, IGF, like, insulin like growth factor, which is a big proponent in like hypertrophy muscle growth. There is, well, not human growth hormone, but growth hormone. In human breast milk, there's human growth hormone. So, I mean, it depends on the animal, but either way, like there's growth hormones in all milk because they're all designed to literally turn a baby into an adult. And I mean, depending on the animal, like, a baby cow, a calf needs to grow into a full ass cow and it does that by milk. So, I mean, a baby, a human baby drinks nothing but milk for its first 6 months, literally nothing but milk and sleep. And it
Yeah.
doubles its lean body mass in the first 6 months of life, just on those two things alone. Just parasympathetic nervous system breathing, which is sleeping, and raw milk.
Yeah. It's so
It's
hard
very
to
similar to
find raw
urine.
milk today, though. It's almost like I was trying to find it and I was like, I couldn't get it. Like I had to drive somewhere like really far and like pick it up. Like it's like a hassle to get one.
I on the way from the
Sorry, you cut out. I didn't hear that part.
I've gone through it. That's all
I think you're good now.
right. Word. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. So I was saying like it's hard to find raw milk nowadays. Like I mean, what do you do? Like I know you sent me a link, but I was like, dude, I had to drive like
I
so
drive
far
far.
to find one.
I drive far.
Yeah.
It's two and a
I
half
guess you
hours
just
away.
gotta
The
make
farm I go to. I'm in the car on the way back right now from the farm.
Oh really?
Yeah, I've been
Man,
in the car for 4.5 hours today doing this. But
man.
I mean, once I go, I stock up. Real food doesn't really go bad fast. like butter stays good for super long. Raw milk can actually stay good in your fridge for months.
Oh, wow. That's
As long as it's
interesting.
kept at the right temperature, like it doesn't really go bad. Pasteurized milk actually goes bad a lot faster than raw milk.
Damn.
And
Makes sense.
honestly, even when raw milk goes quote unquote bad, it just curdles and the bacteria kind of just like the milk kind of digests itself. The
Yeah.
bacteria will consume the sugars and their pee and poop go into the milk, which are good for your microbiomes. And you can use like milk kefir, like kefir grains to consume the sugar in the milk, which will then pee and poop and release different bacteria that are good for your gut.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So we got raw milk. What else would you add to that list?
Fruit, raw eggs. I would say that's like the trinity of like my favorite foods: fruit, raw eggs, raw milk.
Bro,
And
yeah,
then
I truly believe that's facts because I've been on that fruit and raw egg vibe and it's been really good to me. I'm really
yeah,
wishing to get this raw dairy or raw milk. Like I'm like it's like the only thing I need, I feel like. But
yeah. And I mean, to break it down into like 5 specific foods, like I feel like fruit's a wide category. There's like hundreds, thousands of fruits out there.
yeah.
Like if I was to pick one, it would probably be blueberries,
I love blueberries.
personally.
Fire.
But I mean, there's lots of great fruits out there. But if I had to pick one only, I would probably do blueberries. But
And are there
that's my
some
personal
fruits
preference.
like for example that you like just don't vibe with? Like for example, like for me, I don't really like m- mess with bananas that much. I don't think they're amazing. I don't
I
really
don't
see
mess with them in the US, but if I was down in Nicaragua or out in Hawaii, like I would mess with those
yeah.
bananas out there. It depends on the banana. Like there's, not all bananas are made the same.
Yeah.
Like I don't
That's
fuck
true.
with the Cavendish bananas, but like the different varieties that they have in other places, like they're so fire.
Yeah. And I've been following your stuff and hearing that you're like kind of transitioning now into like a rebuilding phase. Can you talk us through a little bit about like what that is and how it's different from like the phase before that?
Yeah, so it's been about 6 months of rebuilding now, maybe even a little longer. But before that, it was about 3 years of all cleansing. So it was a lot of fasting, a lot of detox stuff, a lot of juice fasting, urine fasting, a lot of just everything detox, and a lot of restriction, a lot of really just cleaning out my body, enemas, everything that I pretty much advocate for. And that's all mentioned in my How to Fast course. I've been working on that for years and really going through all of it. And then I pretty much got down to like my natural body weight, like as low as I could possibly go, which was 113 pounds. And then it's been about 6 months since I went back to like really pounding on food and like rebuilding and working out to put size back on. And now I'm at about 145, 150.
Wow.
And really, it's just been, I think that both have their time and place. Cleansing and building both have their time and place. I feel like they can both be done simultaneously. Personally, I decided to go all in for cleansing and then all in for building, and building from a sturdy foundation after having cleansed out all the shit from growing up in America and especially in New Jersey,
Yeah, that's facts.
eating processed shit. So I just
Eh,
wanted to get everything out, detox as hard as I could, and then go into rebuilding and rebuild from that solid foundation. And I also had a lot of digestive issues, so I was working towards that as well with the cleansing.
yeah. And what kind of things or what kind of foods do you eat when you're rebuilding? Do you focus a lot on that raw milk or even raw meat?
Raw milk is probably my staple. I I'm not against raw meat. I think a balance of cooked and raw is cool. I don't think like because there's different philosophies on it. Some say that cooking it somewhat makes certain things more bioavailable, but then it also kills some of the things. So there's like a balance there. I think eating raw sometimes and cooking sometimes is cool. I think the same thing about eggs. I definitely don't think that about fruit or milk. There's different ideas. People have different concepts. Like, for example, fruits and milk are really, in my opinion, the only two foods, or from my observation, the only two foods on earth that really are created for the sole purpose of being eaten. Like they only
Mm.
exist to be consumed by something. Whereas like meat, like an animal doesn't necessarily want to die. Like it has other purposes other than just being eaten. So of course there is still value there, but it's not like super it was only by something where, like, for example, like milk is literally only produced by the mammary glands to be consumed by a baby to growing, where like the fruit is being produced like for the sole existence of being eaten by something and the seeds spreading to somewhere else so there could be nutrients somewhere else. So that's pretty much like the philosophy on like, you know, what foods are like designed to be eaten. I would say milk and fruit are the two that are like the main ones. And then I mean, like leaves and plants and seeds don't really want to be eaten, so they are chemically protected with oxalates and phytic acid and linoleic acid and other things. But you can get around them to some degree and make them less harmful and still get some benefit by like sprouting. So for example, like animals that eat nuts on purpose, like squirrels, they will not eat the nut right away when they find it. This is why squirrels bury their nuts, and they say they save them for the winter. They don't really save them for the winter. They just bury them until they sprout. And then when they see the nut sprouting out of the ground, that's when they go back and eat it.
Oh, wow. It's interesting.
So when the seed sprouts, a lot of the defense chemicals are gone, and it's more focused on growing the plant rather than protecting the seed. So a lot of chemical transformation occurs, and sprouting can be, you know, a completely different experience, whether you eat something that's like completely raw, like a cashew or whatever, versus like something sprouted, like an almond versus sprouted almond could be totally different nutritionally and the way it affects your gut and all that.
Wow, that's interesting. And now I kind of want to get into the fasting, the cleansing side. What are some basics you would have to tell us, like, you know, like when should somebody start fasting? You know, I mean, when would it be necessary? Should it be something that someone should do in their life? Like, or should intermittent fasting be a lifestyle? Like, what are some basics you could tell us about fasting that, you know, like somebody can take? I know you have this course, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, all the reasons to fast, like how to know when you really need to fast, is in the course. But I mean, just to give an overview of what I would say, really like it comes down to what your goals are and what, you know, situation you're dealing with as far as your health. There are certain scenarios that definitely align with fasting, and there are others that don't, and some that align with like feasting. So there's a difference between complete restriction, where like you're on liquids and like trying to consume the least amount possible, which I really would only recommend for people who have a lot of experience. However, most of the time it's feasting. Like it's really just going on liquids and consuming lots of juice or lots of something specific.
So when you're in
A
that
lot differently than the technical definition. Yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
yeah, so when you're in that cleansing phase, like, are you or sorry, the rebuilding phase, are you like doing any type of intermittent fasting, or are you just feasting all day, like on like proper foods like raw milk or fruit or eggs, you know?
So I don't do intermittent fasting. I'm not a huge fan of intermittent fasting, to be honest. I'm really more so of a fan of extended fasting, because intermittent fasting, I mean, some people advocate for it for different reasons. I agree with some of them. And I mean, there's research to support that a lot of the benefit from intermittent fasting really just comes from overall like restriction of eating. Like, so it's not necessarily like the eating window that's specific that makes people lose weight or feel better. It's more so just like the fact that eating only within a specific window leads people to tend to eat less in general, which helps them lose weight in general. So I think there are ways to, I think, better optimize. Like, it depends, you know, trial and error. For me personally, I don't like it as much, especially in my rebuilding phase, because I did a lot of like real extended fasting, which, you know, affects a lot of things like thyroid function and metabolism. And there's a lot of rebuilding as far as like metabolic function comes back after fasting. So I'm working more on that. So consuming smaller meals throughout the day, kind of all the time, to kind of lower myostatin and, you know, enhance thyroid function and a couple other things, you know, hormone balance and things like that.
That's interesting that you say that, because I feel like right now I'm more in a rebuilding phase, but at the same time I'm still doing, like, I've been doing intermittent fasting for a while, um, for the reasons you mentioned. It was just like, you know, they have their benefits, but I've always like questioned it, like especially when I started going more towards like the fruit and raw eggs and a little bit of that's it. I feel like it was just, yeah, it was just fruit and raw eggs. After that, like I felt like I I feel like I needed to eat more, like I was like, I need to eat some more fruit. Even like I would start getting hungry. But in that rebuilding phase, so you don't think it's necessary to do intermittent fasting or any type of fasting at all? Like just focus on eating the right types of foods is all right.
Yeah, and I mean, only if you like feel constipated, I would say like a solid food vacation could be beneficial. And really, that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about fasting. Like, it's kind of like any kind of food density reduction is what I consider fasting. Like anything where you're like restricting your diet in any way, I pretty much consider that fasting.
Yeah.
Which is like why my course is pretty diverse compared to like what people normally consider fasting. And I guess people would disagree with me that that's not fasting because technically it's not. Fasting really is defined as like abstaining from anything that breaks ketosis. So pretty much if you're consuming anything other than water, like pee or something like an herbal tea, anything outside of that, if you're consuming anything, you're really not fasting and you're really not in ketosis. So like if you're consuming any kind of fats, any kind of juices, like people don't really like it's not technically considered fasting. Like you're not starving yourself in that sense.
Yeah.
So it's really just a solid food vacation. Like you're transitioning to less dense sources of food. And I wouldn't say
Hmm.
that, fasting is necessarily starving under the right circumstances with adequate preparation. So it
Yeah.
really depends.
And should you only fast if you want to lose weight, or like should you fast just because it's healthy for you?
I mean, it really depends like on your goals and what you want to do, but definitely weight loss isn't the only thing. Mental clarity, like spiritual reasons, people who really want to get connected to their breath and really get into the breath work. There's a lot of different things that you can experience with fasting that you can't really experience with food. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that they are better, but I wouldn't say that they're worse. Like it's really not worth comparing. It's like a whole nother side of the human experience spectrum that I feel like most of society doesn't get to experience because they're taught that they need food all the time. And this is, I guess, the main topic that we wanted to discuss, like limiting beliefs on food. And I think one of them is that we need food every day of our life and that we need food all the time. I don't think, and I mean, I've kind of proven that within myself, to go extended periods of time without any calories. And I mean, I'm not the only one. There's lots of people who have done water fasts for more than, 20 something days. And they say that without food, you would die, and without water, you would die. And I went about 5 times the amount of time that they said you would die without water.
Damn.
So, I mean, I think that's a limiting belief that we think that we need a lot more than we do. And a lot of that comes down to we also can't process all the shit that we eat. Our digestion is compromised because our microbiomes are compromised. We get antibiotics. A lot of us don't get breastfed as babies. We use antibacterial everything. We use poisonous, fragrances and cleaning products and detergents and all different shit that just compromises our microbiome inside and outside, the skin and the gut and everything in between. And that inhibits our ability to really process everything. So a big factor of eating is the ability to digest, and a lot of people's digestion is compromised. Metabolic disease is pretty common in today's world.
Yeah, that's true.
Like we're a pretty metabolically unfucking healthy society of people, especially in
Hmm.
the United States.
No, totally. And you touched on something. I was just super curious about the hydration aspect of this. As an athlete, everyone tells you, you got to eat or drink your 12 or 8 cups of water a day and stay hydrated. But like, what do you have to say about that, especially about water? I mean, I know you talk a lot about like other sources of hydration being a lot better than water, and water diluting your system. What do you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't disagree with the hydration stuff. I think hydration is arguably the second most important aspect of health after breathing properly. And I do think that water is, what's the word here? Inferior to some other sources of hydration. And that is because of a couple different factors. But overall, I would say ideally you want to be consuming things that are from living organisms. So water is dead in a sense. It doesn't have carbon attached. It's not as compatible with life as living waters like juices or like milk or things that are already like gone through a living organism and ready to be transferred to another. Whereas like consuming water is like the first process. I think regular water is better absorbed through the skin than through the gut. So
Interesting.
personally, I don't really drink water. I drink more juice, more milk, more eating fruit, things like that. I'm not a huge water drinker.
Yeah. And when you went on this extended period of time without food or water, like how did you survive? How did you stay hydrated? You know, like was it through breath work and
Well,
urine therapy?
urine therapy definitely played a role. There was a lot of preparation. That 15 days with no food or water was preceded by 90 days on just cucumber juice and coconut water, followed by 21 days straight of nothing but my own pee. So everything that went out went back in until my body kind of adjusted and realized how much water it needed, started looping internally, like bladder reabsorbing urine back into the blood, and the cycle kind of looping without having to pee. And then at that point, I just felt like I didn't need to, I wasn't peeing, so I wasn't drinking my pee. I was like, I'm gonna keep going with the restriction and see how it goes. And then I wasn't even thirsty for those 15 days, and it was super psychedelic and super just intense and beautiful.
Wow.
But it felt like I was on acid for 2 weeks straight.
That's
So there came a time, and I didn't even sleep for the last 7 days. It was pretty much entirely like just awake, but very calm and just observant. And it was like, I wasn't running around. I was going for like walks at night and like going like to the beach and, floating on my back in the water at night when I was living in the Dominican Republic at the time. And just,
yeah.
really laying low, not really going out in public during the day because the sounds and things were really intense. But
Wow.
I was really, really observant, like really tapped in to like observing the birds and the sun and the moon and like the way the clouds were moving. It was like cool to like slow down in that sense and really like live in the moment in a way that I never did when I was eating when I was eating food in general, or even just on liquids. Like being on nothing is a whole different game as far as like the psychedelic aspect of the human experience goes.
That's such an interesting topic and an interesting experience to live, bro.
Totally. Like your
And
senses become stronger. It's like you experience a part of the earth that food, I guess, numbs us from.
yeah, that's a good word. Numb us. Yeah, for sure. Um, and as an athlete, I mean, I'm always looking for ways to optimize my strength or stamina, like when I'm training or whatever. What kind of breath work practices do you like suggest, or like kind of like the best ones for you that like helped you like gain the most energy, or specifically through the fasting period? Because I'm sure you were doing a lot of breath work when you weren't consuming any food or water. What got you
Definitely.
through it?
I mean, breath work is like the number one thing. If you're gonna fast without breath work, you might like you're trying to ride a bike without wheels. It's not gonna like it just doesn't work. People
Yeah.
freak out and go binge, and like there's a lot of things that happen when you don't do the breath work and you're not conscious of the breath when you restrict diet. And I think that's a big factor of why people on weight loss journeys are really trying to take control of their health, fail, and end up going back to their normal habits because and then thinking that those practices that they were trying don't work because they never took control of the breath, which is really the primary practice, in my opinion, like that you should really focus on first. If you're going to fast, like you should really learn the breath work first and get control of your breathing before you fast. Because when you experience anything that's emotionally intense, like fasting, the breath is like your surfboard that allows you to ride those emotional waves. And without breath awareness, you're kind of just getting thrown out into the surf and getting fucked up by all the waves, and you don't really know what's happening. And you just get, destroyed in the impact zone.
Yeah.
So it's really it's a powerful tool. But when it comes to fasting or athletic endurance and strength, I think actually the same thing applies to both. The best one, or the best type of breathing, is the slow stuff, the parasympathetic nervous system, what I call in TCM as low vibe breathing. And people talk about high vibe versus low vibe, like low vibe being bad and high vibe being good, which like isn't really true. Like a high frequency just means something is happening frequently. So if your breath rhythm is high frequency, that means you're breathing very fast, which is in alignment with like fight or flight or panicking or anxiety or extreme workouts that are challenging you breathing wise or like aerobically.
Mhm.
So if you can slow down your breathing, you can stay more relaxed. And that's really where it's at as far as like athleticism and being able to manage like the emotions that come with fasting. So in my opinion, CO2 tolerance training, learning to increase your body's carbon dioxide threshold will
And that's through the
allow
exhales, right? Exhale holds.
exhale holds and just slower breathing, like really trying to slow your breath down, like less than one breath per minute, and just doing like more sessions of just less breathing. Like less really is more when it comes to this, because the less you breathe, the more carbon dioxide will build up in your blood. And what people don't know about carbon dioxide is that it's not a waste product. It's not a product of metabolic waste at all. It's a necessary component of, like air metabolism. Like you can't use oxygen without carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is what liberates oxygen from the hemoglobin in your blood and allows it to enter the tissues and muscles and organs and whatnot. So without carbon dioxide, you can't use oxygen, which is why when you breathe extra fast, you go into what they call respiratory alkalosis. You're depleting levels of CO2 in your blood. And when you deplete levels of CO2 in your blood, you can't use oxygen and you start to panic. And this is really what panic attacks are. This is what, anxiety is. This is what, getting out of breath is. It's like you just don't have enough CO2. And there's very limited amounts of CO2 in the air. It's less than 1% of the air is CO2. So there's significantly less CO2 in the air than oxygen. So it takes time to build up reserves of CO2. So a short session of hyperventilating can seriously deplete your carbon dioxide, and it can take several minutes, even longer, to replenish those levels of carbon dioxide. So the best thing you can do as an athlete is not deplete yourself of carbon dioxide and breathe as slowly as possible, no matter how hard or intensely you're working out.
That's interesting. That's powerful, bro.
And nose breathing and tongue posture as well.
Okay. And let's wrap it up here with some urine therapy facts, bro. I'm looking forward to actually hearing about this, because I've been actually doing it myself for the last 2 weeks, and dude, my skin's gotten a lot better. I feel like a little more hydrated. I'm drinking less water and like just recycling the system. But I want to give the listeners some facts first before they think I'm nuts. So what do you got to say about it? I mean, I know there's so many facts. I mean,
yeah, this is really,
so many things.
All of these topics could easily be their own podcast episode that could go like 4 hours each.
Yeah, just give us like
I'll give you like an overview of like the basic like pee isn't waste type stuff.
Yeah.
So first of all, from like a universal perspective, pretty much every animal, every living organism on Earth recycles its own waters at some point. So for example, I mean, pretty much every animal in nature will drink their pee at some point. Like, for example, cats will literally drink like their children's urine. Like when cats have babies, like the mother will literally like drink the kid's pee. Giraffes will do it. Giraffes will literally like headbutt the females in the bladder until they pee. And then they'll drink their pee to taste if they're ovulating. So they know like if they want to have sex with them to like make babies with them.
Oh, wow.
There's so many animals that do it for different reasons. Like I've seen video, you could go on YouTube and search it. I mean, pretty much the entire animal kingdom does it at some point. And then even the plant kingdom does it. Every fruiting tree, if you think of fruit juice like tree urine, the seed comes out of the same spot as the urine, the same way for like human men, we release the seed through the same hole that we release the pee. Yeah. So it's basically the same thing with trees. The fruit juice is basically the tree pee. And then let's say the fruit falls from the tree when it's ripe and nothing eats it. That fruit juice gets reabsorbed back into the soil, drank by the tree again. It's basically urine therapy, looping and recycling its own water. If you were to put a plant in a bottle, like a closed glass bottle, it would create its own ecosystem within the bottle. And people have done this. So every organism has the ability to recycle its own waters. So that being said, that's just an overview of like how other organisms are doing it. But as far as the information goes, your urine is your blood after it's filtered. The medical term for urine is plasma ultrafiltrate. Your liver is basically an enzyme powerhouse that will, through different enzymatic reactions, take things out of the blood that don't belong and send them to the colon for excretion, to the large intestine. And then your lungs are the main eliminatory organ of the blood. So 70% of elimination is carried out through respiration, through breathing. And then the remaining is through the liver to colon pathway, and then also from the skin pathway. So the remainder of that, after the blood is clean, then goes to the kidneys, where the kidneys will reabsorb nutrients and decide what's excess and what's actually needed to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. And the urine is what happens after that. So it goes to the kidneys and then the bladder, which both serve the function as well as many other functions, absorbing or reabsorbing nutrition from the urine back into the blood. And then after that, you pee out what's excess, what in that moment the body doesn't necessarily need, or what the body can't absorb. So an example of this would be like taking a vitamin supplement and seeing a lot of the dark urine happen from that, or your urine is like glowing with all the shit that was in the supplement. And that's because you're not actually absorbing most of what's in there. And, you know, those, whatever the vitamins are actually significantly more bioavailable in your urine the second time around. So if you're taking supplements and you're seeing super dark pee, you're basically just paying for expensive pee that you're giving away to big sewage and big pharma, because the sewage companies have,
$1 billion
they're in
industry.
cahoots and contracts with pharmaceutical companies. They take your urine and they use it for different medical drugs, different cosmetic products, a bunch of different shit, and then they sell it back to you. They convince you that it's waste so they can use it for things that they then sell back to you.
And what do you have to say to those people that think about it, think about pee as like, filled with bacteria and it's like super like not sterile?
I mean, I don't think anything good for you is sterile. Sterile is another word for dead. Bacteria is a good thing. Anything you consume with loads of bacteria, you're basically consuming an entire like universe. You're like a whole earth per cell. So if something doesn't have bacteria in it, like, this is why I'm not a big advocate for drinking water, because it doesn't have bacteria. Pretty much everything you eat should have bacteria, because everything should interact with the bacteria in you and nourish your microbiome. We live in a society that is completely metabolically dysfunctional because we lack bacteria. So, the more things with bacteria, the better. And urine therapy usually improves people's digestion for this reason.
And what do you have to say about mindset drinking when you're drinking pee? Like, a lot of people are like, when they first do it, they're going to think like, oh, this is like not it. Like, how much of that actually affects the whole process, or does it even affect it at all?
I mean, there's definitely like a deconditioning that needs to occur, over time. But I feel like, the first time you're like, what the fuck? And then you're like, all right, that wasn't really that bad. And it depends on like what you eat. For me, like, I was completely fruitarian at the time, like eating nothing but fruit when I first tried it. And it didn't really taste bad at all. I actually like was weirded out by the fact that I low-key liked it. And I've had a lot of people like message me, say the same thing, like, yo, is it supposed to taste good? Like, why do I like it? And I'm like, because it's good. But, if you're eating McDonald's, your pizza tastes like absolute shit. So I usually do recommend for people to take a day or two of like extra hydration so that you try it the first time when it's clear, so that you don't psych yourself out the first time and drink something disgusting. But also, when it's dark, it is the most potent, like nutritionally, because it's the least diluted. When you consume a lot of water, a lot of liquids in general, your pee gets clear because your blood is diluted. There's more water and less blood. So that's why your pee gets clear. That's really the only reason.
So it'd be better to drink your pee in the mornings, because that's when it's the darkest, probably, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's better to drink it in the morning. It's just like more concentrated. If you're drinking your clear pee throughout the rest of the day, you're pretty much getting the same shit in, like, you don't really need it to be that concentrated. I don't think. It's more preference. If you only want to drink it once and you want like the most bang for your buck as far as like drinking your pee, I think the morning one is the most potent. You're going to get the most value for the least amount of pee you have to drink in the morning. But there's a trade-off, because it'll also be the grossest one of the day.
Yeah. Nick, thanks for being on the show today, bro. A ton of knowledge discussed today around food, fasting, breathing, urine therapy. You're definitely on a mission, bro, and I totally support it, and I'm totally with you, and I'm looking forward to all the courses. I actually really want to take your course on how to fast, because I'm interested in that and the breathwork part. So
a lot of information in there, bro, for sure. You'll definitely learn a lot of more information that, like, the topics we discussed on this podcast episode, like, I really go in that course. So,
and people need to know the truth, bro. I mean, like, people just, I feel like it's like health is the biggest issue we have like nowadays, and not knowing like the actual facts is like just terrible for society in general.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And in general, there's just a lot of information being thrown, a lot of it conflicting with other information, and people don't really know what to believe. And that's why I'm a huge advocate for trial and error. Like, see what works for you, like everything that someone says not to do, like, do it and find out for yourself. Everything that people say is so good for you, try to not do it and see how you feel. So pretty much, like, I'm a huge advocate for trial and error. Learn for yourself through your own experience. You weren't the person in the meta-analyses, even though you're a human just like they are. So those studies can give you some value, but they're not 100% tailored to you. So figure out what works for you, go through your own process of trial and error, and just be open to new information and new practices that come your way and new things. And, you'll never go overly wrong that way. And I mean, either way, I don't really think there's a wrong way to do the human experience.
Yeah,
So
no, totally. Thank you, bro. And thank you guys for watching. Go ahead and follow him on Instagram at Gruff in the Garden. Again, a ton of information. Take his courses. I'm going to take them. So thanks, Nick, again. And until next time, guys.
thanks for having me on here, bro. Much love, everybody. Thanks for listening.
I appreciate every one of you guys for staying until the end of this video. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a like, and follow me on Instagram at fadethepublic_pod. I'll see you in the next one.